Greetings, one and all. It may not be clearly visible, but I'm climbing a little bit of a hill right now, and I don't care for it. Anyway, it's April 18th, 2021, y'all, which means it's a new day, and that means another story. But before we get to that, remember as always to like, share, subscribe, hit up my Patreon, which helps it grow. Helps it grow, helps me grow, helps my little channel grow, helps the flowers grow, helps the children grow, helps the economy grow, helps my bank account. Well, I mean, literally, it would kind of help my bank account grow. That's not even a joke. Anyway, I'm rambling because I'm talking while going up a hill, and I think it's making me a little delusional. Anyway, the link to my Patreon page is in the description below, as well as the links to my Instagram and Facebook pages closely related to the content that I'm producing both here, as well as my other YouTube channel, Steve the Amateur Historian. And all that said, let me catch my breath. Well, this is as high as I'm climbing. A little bit higher and I'd be up to Mount Tabor, but I just went back to work and my legs are still getting used to it. That was more than enough of a climb for me. So anyway, it's April 19th, not 18th, April 19th. Do this long enough, you start forgetting the actual dates that you're supposed to do, which is kind of problematic because that's kind of the whole purpose of this thing. It's something that happened on this specific date, another day in history. But for this one, we're going a little Hollywood with it. We're going back to 1968. Now, there was a guy named Milton Berle. Those of you that are old enough to remember him, or you know Hollywood and TV history, you know who this guy is. First time I ever saw him was in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. He was just one of the many actors in it that, you know, when I first saw it, I was a little kid. I didn't know who any of these people were. I didn't know who Jonathan Winters was, or Mickey Rooney, or Sid Caesar, or Buddy Hackett, or any of those people. They were just the actors in the movie. They were just dudes to me at that point. But Milton Berle was, you know, one of the main characters in that film, of which the film had like 20 main characters. And he was, you know, he was an actor. He was, you know, he did comedy, he did TV stuff. And I've heard the periodic story or two that he wasn't the greatest guy in the world. Now, granted, a lot of well-to-do people, a lot of people with a lot of money, a lot of people that like to continue to accumulate money, they'll try to fudge the system, the tax system specifically, and if they're well enough to do, they'll try to use their influence to kind of cut corners that the average Joe like me and probably you wouldn't be able to do. Go up there and you'll get to Mount Tabor, but again, that's not my objective today. So, Milton Berle is a guy who's known, he has influence, and he has a tax accountant, a guy named Mo Morris, 76-year-old guy, but he's there for his friend Milton. And he decides to, again, you know, a lot of people try to fudge the tax system, especially if they got a lot of money. And, you know, Bill and Hillary Clinton did pretty much this same thing, where they kind of BS'd a lot of things for a tax write-off, including, if I'm correct, a pair of Bill Clinton's old running shoes. They were able to get a tax write-off on that because they had influence. Well, Milton Berle's tax guy, this, you know, 76-year-old Morris guy, goes to the Internal Revenue Service directly, goes straight to the IRS, and has, you know, no qualms. Apparently he just thought he could just say like, oh, well, I work with this guy, so I can do and say whatever I want. So he goes to the IRS and he says, hey, if I give you a bribe, like, can we get like, it was like $60,000 worth of like unnecessary expenses, the kind of stuff that if you were able to add them to your taxes, you'd get like a bigger return or, you know, greater tax write-off. He went right to the IRS directly and offered them a bribe to do this for Milton, and it was for his 1960, it said it was for his 1960 tax returns, which is interesting because the article is dated 1968. But anyway, you know, apparently Milton Berle wasn't a big enough guy to intimidate the IRS, because the IRS brought in Mr. Morris for trying to bribe them. And potentially the best part of this whole thing was, if you bribe an IRS guy, there apparently, I don't know if this is still how it is, but there was a 6-year statute of limitations. So if he made this bribe 6 years later, you couldn't bust him for it anymore. Well, he made the bribe in October of 1962, and this article was April 1968. So had it been October 1968, it may have been too late. So they got to this guy and arrested him for this bribe with just a couple months to spare. And it's a wonder why it took so long. Maybe, you know, because the guy apparently took the bribe. So maybe it was, you know, he took it and was hush hush and it was found out that he did this, or maybe he took it and then felt guilty and finally admitted to it. Maybe the IRS or other agencies were bearing down on him, and he probably struck a deal like, all right, I won't get in a lot of trouble if I just say, yeah, this guy gave me a bribe. And then finally, when he admits that, they go after the guy that did the bribe to arrest him and hold him accountable. And as a result of this arrest, the IRS decided to audit Milton Berle's 1960 tax return, where it said he made in excess of $150,000, which, I mean, makes sense. The guy was a celebrity. But I almost wonder if there was some more irregularities they found in his taxes. I don't remember hearing any story about Milton Berle getting busted for tax evasion or anything crazy like that. So maybe there wasn't anything in there, but with the revelation of this bribe, you know, Milton Berle found himself being even more scrutinized by the IRS in terms of looking into his financial past. And I mean, how could you blame him? This Mo Morris guy had been working for him for like some 20 years. So who knows what other kind of sketchy stuff he maybe convinced Milton Berle was okay to do when it wasn't, or stuff that he just kind of went and did. I kind of get the vibe. Again, I've heard Milton Berle was not the greatest guy in the world, so it would not surprise me if he, you know, was in full knowledge with, and, you know, even colluded to some degree with Morris, in terms of, like, Morris is like, hey, I'm gonna go give the IRS a bribe and we're gonna help you a little bit more. And Milton's like, all right, go do it. And he went and did it. And according to the article, Milton and his wife, because they did a joint tax return, so technically she'd get mixed up in all this, it said that they weren't, you know, they weren't also arrested. It didn't seem like they were necessarily under investigation, but still, I get the feeling Mr. Berle probably knew what was going on through all this. So it was an interesting little story to stumble upon, a little piece of interesting, even though the article's New York, still, you know, Milton Berle's a celebrity, so that, you know, and he was in movies, so there's a little bit of a, you know, interesting little piece of Hollywood history to it, as much as, you know, it's a television piece of history, it's a comedian piece of history, all that stuff. So of course, just as I begin theorizing about how this bribe would have come out and why it was so long before it did, the one part of the article I didn't finish was like the last two little snippets, one of which expressed how the bribe came about. And my theory was pretty accurate. There was a grand jury investigation conducted in 1968 looking specifically into corruption within the IRS. So, you know, the taking of bribes to alter one's taxes is about as corrupt as you can get in relation to the IRS specifically. So, yeah, this bribe came out. The existence of it came out as a result of this investigation. And not a moment too soon. Again, a couple months later, they would not have even been able to bust Mo Morris for this bribe because it would have been past the statute of limitations. So good timing for that grand jury convening. I probably found out that story and they're like, wait, when did it happen? October 19th. Okay, 1960 October. Oh, yes, we still have time. So it was just too, like every other story, it was too good to pass up. A little bit of Hollywood, a little bit of corruption, a little bit of celebrity corruption, as well as IRS corruption. And well, I was gonna say, how often do you hear about that? But I get the feeling that probably happens a little more often than we think. So I'd like to thank you so much on this beautiful day for joining me and taking in today's story. And as always, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit up my Patreon if you want to help me out that way. I'm always posting new stuff there to give you bang for your buck. And the link to that is in the description below, as well as the links to my Instagram and Facebook pages, closely related to the content that I'm posting both here, as well as my primary channel, Steve the Amateur Historian. And this is a gorgeous freaking house right here. I just had to show you before I departed, because it's like I'm here and it's there. But all that said, this has been Steve, and I'll see you tomorrow.